Universal consciousness, may the ideas that we share in this meeting be those of truth, of wisdom, of grace, and of right action. In every thought, word, and deed, may we show complete accord with universal law. Welcome, everyone, and welcome to my friend Adryenn Ashley. I'm very excited and honored to have Adryenn join us today. I have been thinking about all the wonderful things that I love about Adryenn. I met her in 2008. I was working for Tesla at the time, managing the second store in the entire world, and Adryenn had a client that wanted to test drive a Tesla and write about it. And so that was how we first met. And then
It
we
was a
ran
friend.
into it.
It was a
Huh?
friend. It was a friend, not a client.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought you were his publicist.
I, I know. Well, no, it was Tim Ferriss. No, he was just a friend,
Oh.
and he was just a friend. But everybody thought we were dating for the longest time, which was hilarious. Because no, we were
Well,
never
thank
dating.
you.
He's just
Thank
my
you.
friend. But he's like, he wants to drive a Tesla, and I'm like, yeah, let's do that. So we just an epic James Bond photo shoot.
That's
So,
awesome. I had no idea all these years. Thank you for clarifying.
oh yeah.
So there you go. I already learned something new about you in the first 5 minutes. But Adrienne is just an amazing woman. She knows all these fascinating people, and she's always doing these like really exciting things and getting into these spaces that have been like up and coming. And I feel like she's kind of a superwoman. Like she's just very confident and she knows her stuff, whatever she gets into. And then she's also very responsible and she's very like thoughtful and courageous, not afraid to like, live outside of the box and just be true to herself. And so I'm so excited to get to know Adrienne better today with you and just learn like what is it that inspires her and drives her and like how does she do it all? Like I
Coffee.
mean, I've seen you change like so much over the years, like especially like putting your health first. Like it's just phenomenal. Like you keep getting younger and younger and you're just like doing a gazillion things. So feel free to share whatever it is you would like to, because I'm just like intrigued.
Oh, sure. Well, thank you. And thank you for having me. Uh, I have actually reinvented myself a number of times, but I have, my foundation is in the 80s. And so Madonna had an annual ritual of rebranding, just like every new season, just like fashion, every year there's new fashion trends. I don't do it quite that much, but the idea that you don't have to stick with one thing forever kind of was ingrained in me at a young age. So I've had several lifetimes. I've worked in entertainment and then I fell off a truck working on the movie I Know What You Did Last Summer and busted my ankle, was in a cast for 18 months, couldn't walk for 6 years, and went from being a performer to being a producer, which I actually like better, being a producer, because I don't necessarily have to put on makeup every day. And broke into banks for a living, worked in high tech, um, healthcare, everything. Just, I mean, I've had so many different lifetimes of experience all rolled into one. And now that I'm over 50, the aha moment is I ran out of, am I allowed to swear on this show?
Yes, you are. Just
But
be
I,
yourself.
I ran out of fuck. Like, I don't know what happened. I did not know. It's kind of like, it's kind of like women. When you're born, you only have a certain number of eggs. Well, you only have a certain number of fucks. And I say, get rid of those early. Like, if I could have gotten rid of all of them before I turned 20, my life would be completely different. I cared about things that had absolutely no bearing in the long term of my life when I was younger. Things felt life or death. And after 50, I don't know where those feelings went, but they're gone.
So are
Really?
you saying it just happened like overnight, or do you think it was something that was leading you there?
No, I think magically I ran out of fucks. Like magically. I mean, is it like a shift in hormones or something? Like literally, I was like, okay, I'm done. I've,
Mm.
you only have so much time and energy to do things, right? So, um, I have done a ton of personal development along the way. Like, don't get me wrong. there used to be a thing when I would feel like I had done something wrong, like I'd said the wrong thing to a boy, right? And then I would stress out and have this physical manifestations of, you know, dread and panic and like, why did I care? If I said the wrong thing, I said the wrong thing. Whatever. Right? The world isn't ending. And I think people don't, I think people take things so seriously that really shouldn't be even consuming the bandwidth at all. So,
Yeah, I think that's huge, and it's great that you're in that place now where you have the freedom to just really be you. And I never thought that you weren't before, but it's amazing, right, how we perceive people differently, but also, like, I guess being a few years behind you, I'm not there yet, although I am in many ways, but I realize that there are still things holding me back, and I'm really working on breaking free because I realize, I'm only this age now once, and I wanna live life as much as possible. I don't wanna have these things
yeah.
holding me back that aren't even real.
So that was the thing. So you did not perceive that as ever not being how I was. There's the passing. So I'm an Aspie, right? So we have our public facing mask, and then we have our who we really are. And our who we really are. Asperger's is a form of autism. It means that you can obsess over things. You can literally run it through your head like 50,000 times. Um, I have learned over the years, actually, the easiest way for me to do it is um, you literally preconceive of everything that could go wrong, and then you run through scenarios. It's kind of like Doctor Strange at the end of the Avengers, where he runs through like 110 million potential outcomes, and there's only one where they actually have a solution, where they win. I don't know if you ever saw that movie, but it's like that. I run
No.
everything, and then I choose what is the best course of action that is going to get me to the resolution that I want with the least amount of drama. And that's how I run through the world. That seems to work as a good tool, but the concept of not what you the number one thing is confidence in who you are. It actually is super simple. The formula is super, super, super simple. Walk through the world in integrity, right? Of who you are. So you own your words, you own your actions. You don't do anybody wrong. That's that karma play, right? And keep your receipts. When people say, this happened, I'm like, pretty sure it didn't. Would you like to see the text message, or would you like to see the email? Would you like to see this? Just know that you've got your receipts. And I use, like Otter, we were just talking about. I have things recording and transcribing and keeping notes and keeping tabs and keeping like it's all good, right? I know what happened when, and as long as I walk through the world with integrity, I'm totally good.
Mm.
And then you just don't have to worry. It makes it really, really easy, right? Are you going to make mistakes? Absolutely. Did you make them with good intentions and not doing anything negative or nefarious to anyone? Then you're fine. Just keep your karma clean, and you can walk through the world with no regrets and just let all of those obsessive compulsive thoughts go.
Mm. I really appreciate all that, and I didn't know that about you. Like with autism, I have this theory, and I could be way off, but I feel like a lot of us, or maybe all of us, are somewhere on that spectrum because it's like, what is normal? Is there really somebody that is like 100% normal, right? Like
Yes,
it's
yes,
like
there's one. I'm sure there's one.
there's okay. I don't know what that is.
Well, yeah, exactly that. But that was the conversation it was first, it was we were neurodivergent, right? And I'm like, okay, so I have 10 years on the motivational speaking stage, performance training, mind, body, spirit, self-help, personal development, all that stuff. I have enough tools to mask. I didn't even identify as an Aspie, even though I probably should have figured it out a long time ago, but I didn't until I took a test, and it was like, oh, you're full blown Aspie, but you have enough tools to pass as a normie. It was like, oh, that would make so much sense, right? Because I'm wicked smart in certain things. I mean, it's now that now that I have a diagnosis, I'm like, oh, I wish I had known that when I was younger. Like, I raised my kid with the understanding of this is how this works. This is how this works. This is what you're going to experience. This is how you overcome it. Here's a tool to deal with this. Nobody gave me any of that. So my childhood was quite random and tragic and challenging. Let's just say I didn't come into my
Hmm.
own until my mid-20s.
Hmm. I can relate, and you got me thinking about this a lot. Like, do certain types of people gravitate towards certain type of tools because they know inherently that they will benefit them, right? Like, I'm also like really into personal and spiritual development, and like I have all these practices that I do regularly to keep me grounded, to keep me focused on what I want, to, you know, direct like my thoughts and my emotions in desirable way, not suppress or repress, but having a healthy relationship. And it's like there's people that have no interest in that. And is it because they're normal and I'm not?
Well, no, that's what's interesting is no, I would say normals also, normies also are attracted to personal development for everybody has different reasons, right? Like I am not the girl to cry, right? I'm not crying in public. I'm not doing a breakthrough on stage. I'm not doing any of those things. I'm not doing I don't like negative emotions. So my dating coaches, Orna and Matthew Walters, um, they're the ones who disconnected the physical manifestation of all the panic when I'm having um, like, did I say the wrong thing type of feelings from the oops, I'm probably gonna get mugged if I don't leave right now. Then I still get the physical panic, the fight or flight. Anyway, but they say I have to have all of the emotions. I'm human, I get to experience all of the emotions. And I went, no, I like being robotic. I have reprogrammed my neutral to be happy. So to get me below neutral into unhappy takes a lot. I don't like that part. I don't want to do those pieces.
Hmm. I like that. I don't know how
That's
they feel about that, but that's something that really resonates with me. And like, that's something that I've been working on for a long time and, and still continue to work on. Like, I'm rereading a book by Abraham. I don't know if you're familiar with, Esther and Jerry Hicks,
yep,
and just like remembering like how much control I have and how it's about allowing, well-being into our lives, and that, what we experience is really based on, how we feel. And
right.
so, yeah, I want to experience all the good stuff, but it's more than just that, because I have a background in metaphysics, so I also reason on things correctly because I don't think that it's appropriate to like, be laughing at a funeral, you know, that's socially not appropriate, but in a different country it might be, but I think
Well,
it's
it
important to
depends.
understand.
I want a party. I want, I'm Irish. I want to have a wake, but I don't, I also want to be torched and ashes scattered over the ocean, on the cliffs, so like I'm not a don't bury me. Ooh, little things like that just like freak me out. But what's interesting is everybody has to figure out, I'm in Web3 and you have all of these people who are like, oh, it's so exciting, it's new, and they're getting suckered into these pump and dump fraudulent things because nobody knows what they're talking about yet. Not nobody. I mean, I do, and the people that I run with do, but mainstream consumers don't have enough exposure yet to really understand the perils and the pitfalls and how to spot the frauds and all that kind of stuff. And it just reminds me of we're going down the rabbit hole. You said anything. I did not expect it to go this route, but we're going to. It just reminds me that they fluorinate the water to make people more susceptible. Uh, and so we're really have a population that's exposed to propaganda. I was having this conversation with my girlfriend the other day, and she's very liberal. She's left, but she's not a snowflake, right? And people call her a snowflake. I'm like, you're not a snowflake. She goes, but I'm very liberal. I go, no, snowflakes don't think for themselves. That's the whole point. They listen and regurgitate to what they're told. That's a snowflake. She's a thoughtful, critical thinker and very liberal and has great ideas and can think something all the way through and do the research. That's somebody you want to have critical debate with. I have other friends on the side who are more conservative who are also not whatever they call, I don't even know what they call them, but uh but they can have critical thought, and those kinds of people can agree to disagree. They can actually see the benefit in the argument of the other person and understand their perspective and how they got there. And then the critical differences usually tend to be, how are we going to pay for it, or how are we going to enforce it, or how are we going to track progress, right? When you end up having those kinds of conversations, you get to that very high level where it's not about, we don't want to clean the water and you do. That's never the thing, right? That's how it's positioned, but it's positioned that way to keep us apart. I think the whole entire piece of mainstream media and propaganda today is to keep everyone apart, to allow those who are in power to keep doing what they're doing while everyone else is distracted. And I say, how about you stop being distracted and look at what's actually happening? Decide what you actually want. And if you cannot enact change, how about you run for office so you can? Oh, look, that's what you did.
Yeah, well, I just realized, like, a lot of the people that are calling the shots, I don't believe they've actually thought through to the consequences of their actions.
Right.
I feel like it's very emotion, very fear-based, like, that's where greed comes from, is from fear, and it's just, like, they don't see the big picture. Because for me, that's where I'm at most of the time. I'm thinking about, like, the long-term consequences of certain actions. It's like it's difficult for me sometimes to talk about certain issues because I'm like, well, sure, I think people should be able to do whatever they want, but then how does this affect our country? How does this affect our species? Right? Like, it's not just about like,
So we're going
I'm
there.
be- yeah, well, I don't believe I'm here to just do what I want when I want anymore. Right?
Right.
I believe I'm here to like add value and to be thoughtful about what I'm doing and why I'm here and what I'm capable of doing. But I didn't used to be like that, I'm from San Francisco. I
Right.
was all about, like, let's just have a good time all the time and do whatever we want and, like,
Oh,
let's not hurt anybody's feelings, but then I realized, like, that's not realistic.
right. Yeah. No, it's we do have to have those conversations. And this is what's funny, right? You're from San Francisco. I'm from Marin County, the woo-woo capital of the world. And I'm going to have a conversation about propaganda and critical thinking and the ability to do due diligence and fact checking. So, um, if a governmental agency changes the definition of gravity, does that change the definition of gravity? Nope. But they updated it on their website, so therefore it must be true. Does that ring like absurdity to you? If you feel that that is absurd, then you may, in fact, possess critical thinking. You may, in fact, be a sensible middle. You might. I'm just saying, I don't want to alarm anyone. Okay. But you might actually have like thought processes that are not really generally approved or allowed nowadays. So, if you believe that a governmental agency changing the definition of a word does not change actual reality, I'm going to talk about the vaccine only for one reason. Number one, a vaccine prevents. The reason that this word is so important is because a vast majority of the population has an understanding based on the vaccination schedules when they went to school, and specifically the big things, especially with the boomers, the big things in their lives, like the polio vaccine, right? Eradicated polio. So when they hear these words, when the vast majority of people hear these words, they have a belief system that kicks in based on what they believe that to mean. When the government revises a definition so they can use the word in marketing and media, um, that's actually propaganda. It shouldn't change the meaning of air, it shouldn't change the meaning of water, but that's basically what happened. So, number two, the clinical process of having, and I am actually making no judgment here whatsoever, yay or nay. Keep this in mind. I'm literally just explaining the thought process on critical thinking. That is it. Number two, the clinical process to be approved for anything really is at least 10 years. If you go back and you do the research, we're probably at 20. That is actually even for old school tech, where we've already had vaccines that are safe and effective with clinical trials, with safety reports, the whole methodology, the whole thing, how they come to it, how they make it. There is a process that is tried and true. Okay. It still takes at least 10 years, at least, usually 15 to 20. So the words safe and effective do not apply to something that early that does not have 10 plus years of clinical safety. They should have said, we think, or it's engineered to, or any other words besides words that have a context and a meaning that deliver certainty to the user, because that's actually not true. And they should have said, this is what we think. Based on the research so far, we believe. Those are all the proper way that you use those words to convey what's actually happening, but they didn't. So that's a problem. If you are critically thinking, you're going to say, I wonder why that is, right? And you're going to ask questions. Now, the other day, in terms of critical thinking, I actually called out a particular crypto project that was launching. And it was very suspect. Why? Because it had manufactured marketing. So there was all this different marketing. Now, keep in mind, a press release delivered through an actual real press release like Newswire cannot be, it can't actually have advertising language. It can't hype. It can't make those kinds of statements, right? The most highly anticipated unicorn crypto token to be released, already at 4,000%, expected to hit 100,000% return. Like, you can't say that stuff in a press release, right? So when I see press releases that are very, very hypey, and then they're everywhere, but no mainstream media, and you can't actually track the token price on the blockchain. So they're doing the pre-sale and they're saying 4,000%, but they're actually setting the pre-sale price, so they made it 4,000%. Like, these are the critical thinking skills you've got to look at and you've got to dig. And why are all of these people seemingly saying the exact same thing in lockstep? Well, it's because it was derived all from a single press release, right? So when you look at manufactured media, when you looked at manufactured hype, when you look at manufactured support, right? So it's now listed on CoinSniper. Why? Because it got the 500 people to back it and say, I'm watching this. It's on the watch list, right? Well, that all of these things can be manufactured. Is it real? Is it real? Is there any there? Who's behind it? Who's responsible for it? Who can be sued if something happens? Is there a company? Like, all these different questions that people need to ask before they do any kind of investing in blockchain, or, well, cryptocurrency. Blockchain is different. Blockchain is the tool, the unfuckwithable ledger of what actually happened. Wouldn't we like to have had an unfuckwithable ledger of what actually happened when it came to the actual ingredients in all of those vaccines? Because if you look at the VAERS data, you had this massive spike and then you have a drop. Now, the question is, did they change the formula or did they just restrict the reporting? I'm not exactly sure what happened right here, but we were like, ooh, and then all of a sudden it went, I'm like, oh, they got something right. That's just a question. I have lots of questions, right? I make no statements. I have lots and lots of questions for which I'm usually silenced. I'm not allowed to ask questions, especially critical thinking questions like, who approved this? Who approved that? Did they read this before they said yes? Those kinds of things. Just wanting to know the facts, because you actually can't make informed consent until you have all the facts. And if you're prevented from having all the facts, that's propaganda. So I would like a world in which we don't have propaganda. I would love to have just, I'd like an entire Congress of Katie Porter. I love them. She's a Democrat from California, former educator, pokes fun at both sides. Not fun. She takes shots at both sides. She is a literally for we the people, picks topics that are actually applicable to all of us, um, regardless of party, and does a really good job. So I appreciate her and I like her, and I would like both sides of the aisle to bring us some candidates that are more like that.
Hmm. Thank you so much for sharing all that. I appreciate because I haven't really talked about that in depth on the show yet. And it's funny, I pulled out, I've got this dictionary here from 2002 because they keep changing the meanings of words. And it is
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. Like when the vaccine first came out, the first thing I did was go to dictionary online and I was like, definition hasn't changed. Like this isn't what this does. It's very misleading. They're calling it something it's not.
And
And
it
that,
needs to be called experimental. It's
yeah,
mRNA. Johnson and Johnson was a vaccine.
yeah,
Johnson and Johnson produced a vaccine. It was not effective, but it was old school.
yeah.
It didn't do anything. I would call that a win for anyone who got vaccinated. It didn't do anything. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. Maybe it helped. Maybe it, who knows? But at
My
least,
husband got it, and he had really, really horrible side effects a couple weeks afterwards. I'd never seen him in that condition before, and then like a year later, he got COVID, and I took care of him, and I was totally fine. And I'm not, vaxxed in any way for that.
but he got Johnson and Johnson.
Yeah.
So that was the interesting thing. There is a clotting thing that's with all of them. So has your husband had a D-dimer test?
I don't think so, but he's
I think
doing fine.
everybody should just have one. Everybody should just know if you're vaccinated, even if you're not. Everybody should know, are you microclotting? Right? Because we don't know, if they're shedding, if they're, we know nothing. That's my whole point. We know absolutely nothing. That is my position on the issue. We know nothing. So we should gather information and make sure that we all know our own health situations, what we need, what our genetics are, right? I have the MTHFR gene mutation that actually, with a new study that's not even done yet, but they're way down the road on it, looks like there's a clotting issue. So I don't have the clotting disorder, but this particular gene mutation also has a clotting effect.
Mm.
Good thing to know, right?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I'll recommend it to him. I've just been focusing on like just create health, just live a healthy lifestyle, and
But
if there's some bad stuff in me, get it out.
that's the key right there. Okay. So that is becoming invincible, right? That's the whole concept behind invincible wellness. It's literally putting your body in such a state of balance with all of the right everything's that it needs that it's just magic.
Yeah,
Magic.
you got me thinking about something else, and I don't know like how to phrase it just yet, but like living in San Francisco, I was a Democrat for most of my life, and I mean I went with my mom when she voted for Bill Clinton back in the day.
I voted for
So
I voted for
so
Bill.
Nice. So I went to this progressive Democrat meeting at a Unitarian church several years ago, and I was so turned off. I'm like, I thought these people are supposed to be progressive, and they were all about like getting even with the other side. And it was like, how are you moving forward if you're just stooping to the same level? But then, like, also, I'm kind of connecting things here. Like, I've been thinking lately how a lot of the like policies that we have around the country, especially the ones that cost the most like tax dollars, seem to come from the left. Like, and these, like, for programs that aren't really actually helping people to change their circumstances, they're programs that tend to keep people at the same level they're always at. It's like a form of control. So it's just really fascinating for me how, like, I think the left actually has a lot more power than the right as far as like controlling how our money is spent. And also, like, I don't think they're actually progressive. I think that they're going backwards. Like, I'm tying in another part here, like language. Um, I think I was told it was Vladimir Lenin said that you know, if you want to destroy a culture, you change what words mean. And so part of me, like, I don't want to subscribe to like conspiracy theories, but part of me wonders, like, is there somebody that, you know, are there people that know what they're doing when they change the meanings of words, or is it just happening by chance? And as I'm asking the question, like, well, I think I know the answer, but it's just a lot I've been thinking about lately.
I will tell you, absolutely, you change the words, you change the narrative. There absolutely is someone orchestrating. I don't know who it is. I'm not even, there are people who say it's one person or say it's another person. I don't go by those kinds of things. I just know, is there a grand plan? Yes. Is it, can we spot it? If you employ critical thinking, yes, you can spot it, right? So when you change the meaning of words, then you literally create an entire society that believes, based on their definition of a word that you've now changed and not told them, um, that the other people, it would be like in the middle of a polio epidemic and not wanting to get the polio vaccine. People have to understand that that is actually the context with which much of this was framed and marketed, right? I can't imagine, there's just no way you cannot imagine what that would feel like, and the anger in people uh because of that, right? That's how they churned it up. They don't want to get vaccinated, right? And then they lump them all into the small group of people who are the, super left anti-vaxxers. It's not that either. They basically made everything either you go along or you're crazy, right? And on the right, uh, if you don't agree with the left, you're a racist, and if you don't agree with the right, um, then you're an anti-vaxxer and all this other. It was just crazy. It's just crazy. The whole thing is crazy, and we need to stop lumping anybody anywhere and decide as a people, what do we want? What are our priorities? In a relationship, it was really interesting. You have to decide, what are your core values, right? Do we even know what our core values are as a country? I think we don't. I think we've lost focus, and we are literally kowtowing, right, to a a small subset of people. And this is, I have so many trans friends. I mean, I'm sure you do too. We grew up in San Francisco. People, we have been flipping he, she for decades. I mean, decades. This is not a big deal. This is like Tuesday, like literally, like it's Tuesday. Oh, great. Like it's just understood. So, but I have always been raised to treat people without regard to their color, their sexual preference, their nationality, their language. I do actually get triggered by people who speak really slow. I call them the slow talkers of America, and they're just Xing windows. This is an inside joke with my ex-husband who told me this. I will go out of my mind. So I do judge some people for some things. Um, like not talking fast enough. That would be one of them. So, but generally, I'll notice your shoes before I notice your nationality. I'll notice your smile, um, little things like that. So I was raised not to consider all of these things. Very Star Trek, right? Very global, very inclusive. But now I'm basically told that if I don't recognize the differences and acknowledge the differences, that I'm a racist. So it kind of reminds me of when I got thrown out of transformation school, because they're like, you are here and you want to get here. I'm like, I'm actually here. I'm already past that. point? I'm over here. And they're like, no, you're here and you have to be here. I'm like, no, I'm already, because isn't the whole point of this conversation that everyone is an individual, not to lump people together and make judgments about entireties of people. I treat every human being as a unique human being. I either like you or I don't like you. Usually I like you. I mean, there's very few people I don't like. They're usually assholes. I have a no assholes, no douchebags, no crazy ass bitches policy in life in general, because I just don't have time or energy and I'm out of fucks. I mean, I've had this policy for a really long time, and now I set that border and that boundary and I just stick to it because I'm 54 and nobody's guaranteed tomorrow. So I just don't have time for any BS. But anyway, my point is, if I already think of the world like how we were, especially our generation, how we were programmed in Star Trek, that like everybody has value, everybody has their own special secret sauce and their own superhero tactic of whatever. Like, why am I now having to go back and say, okay, I acknowledge, like it's just I literally got thrown under the bus and called a racist, because I didn't acknowledge the inherent underlying struggle associated with the success of a particular person who happened to be Black, which, by the way, I've known for a while, but I don't notice. It's like, why can't I just talk about the success? Why can't I just like celebrate the success? Because if I don't celebrate the success without the victimhood, is the success sweeter with victimhood? I don't know. I've never tried to put victimhood on my desserts or my accomplishments. And I don't think I like that flavor. I think if we could just eliminate that and literally give everybody opportunity and stop being afraid to call out people for being assholes, douchebags, crazy ass bitches, name and shame, then we could just move forward and move past it and get to Star Trek.
Well, I
What do you
think
think?
there's a couple things going on. I think a lot of people like drama, right?
I
So
don't do
that
drama.
the backstory is exciting to many people, right? But the thing is, like, for most people, because the majority of us are not born into money, we all have to struggle to succeed in life, right? And even those that are born with silver spoons, like, because again, growing up in San Francisco, I knew some of the wealthiest kids around. Many of them are, they're all grown up now, but many of them still haven't made anything out of themselves, even though their parents are like, multi-billionaires. Like they never achieved anything because they weren't raised by their parents. They were raised by the au pair, right? So they picked up different values. Um, or they just had all this freedom to do whatever they want. And so like they just didn't learn the same things that their parents knew to become successful in the first place. Um, Another thing that you got me thinking about is like, back to earlier, you're talking about, dividing us and how that's an intent. And it's like when we put ourselves into all these unique boxes, we isolate ourselves from the rest of the world. It's like even before this started in the recent years, I always felt it was weird, like for people to say, "Oh, I'm African American or Asian American." Like, how about you're just American? Because I could go and say, "Oh, I'm Russian Romanian American," if I really want to divide myself. But it's not like we're supposed to be united in this country and to celebrate each other's different. So it's kind of like going against what this country is about when we start to separate ourselves. Like, oh, I identify as this as, like, I don't even know what all those labels are anymore. I'm like, how about you're just human, and you're fluid. You could identify with anything you want, but you don't have to like be stuck there, and you don't have to limit yourself and be disconnected from others, because like we're all different. Like no two of us are identical. There's just so much with that doesn't resonate with me, and it's not easy to approach because like you said, people will call you things that are just to try to make you feel bad because you're not playing along with the game, but it's really like not serving anyone.
Yeah, I'm not playing the game. I'm sorry. I have 5 friends who are they, them. I make an effort because I love them. It drives me crazy because it's grammatically incorrect. I have been given lots of tips and tricks and tools, and I'm doing my best, but I have defaulted to calling people by their name, right? Referring everything by the name. In the that made me think the whole point is everybody's unique. I treat everyone uniquely. I think everyone wants to be seen for their value and their uniqueness and their unique contribution to the world and whatever. And I like, okay, there we go. So that's just how we have to do. We have to stop grouping people and bundling. And this is what, and I thought about it and I said, here's another propaganda tactic, right? So it used to be LGB, lesbian, gay, bi. Then it was LGBT, then it was LGBTQ, right? Lesbian, gay, bi, transgender, queer. Queer should cover everything else. Nope. Q plus. Fuck me. Really? Okay. Now it's 20. I saw this on I'm from San Francisco. Literally moved to Miami Beach in Florida so that I could be close to drag queens and gay boys. Because you know what? I'm sorry. I I need a hot body running down the beach with my coffee in the morning. Why? Because they're absolutely beautiful and I like eye candy and they're everywhere here. And I am in my happy place. And why? Because I grew up in San Francisco where all the men were absolutely drop dead gorgeous and usually gay. So not batting for my team. That does not mean that they are not my friends, that they are not absolutely fabulous. And I need that energy and I need the visual around me in life, or I feel insecure. Not insecure in terms of personally, but literally like this place is not right for me. Like if it's too homogenous, I'll drive through the middle of the country. I'll drive through these little small towns. I'll be passing a Piggly Wiggly. And I do this. I'm apologizing right in advance because you know how I feel about things when based on the tone I use to mock it. But I'll be driving through the Piggly Wiggly and if I can't find certain, and I mean like pretty freaking common things, like a Reese's sticks. It's like a peanut butter Kit Kat, right? Well, apparently they're not everywhere. So there's certain things I need a Sephora because I need a gay boy to put my makeup on every now and again. I need an Apple store because somebody's got to talk nerdy to me. I need a Whole Foods because I need to know that I can get organic food, gluten-free, dairy-free, hormone-free, whenever I need to. Even though I'm slipping. I'm a reformed organic, gluten-free, dairy-free, everything, like super foodie, Epicurean, fabulous chef. Now I'm ordering from Grubhub a lot and Uber Eats. But my point being, there's certain requirements that I have for a place that I need to live. So I am literally right by the ocean. I've got my gay boys. I've got my Sephora. I've got my Apple store. I can walk to my Apple store. Like I need these things to feel like I have the community that fits me, right? And sometimes I'll go to these small places and they're just, the best snacks are at the gas station. Although I kid you not, I went to a gas station that had a car wash in the middle of freaking nowhere that had the best gift shop I have ever seen. I'm like, do you sell this stuff online? And she said, no. I said, you should. It was the best. She was the best curator I've ever seen. Husband ran the car wash. She runs the gift shop. I'm like, that should all be online. You would sell 1,000 times more than the people that drive through here. But it was really good. But anyway, I forgot what tangent I was going on. You gotta people
Yeah.
and just treat people individually and don't make assumptions. Oh, that was the thing. They divide you. Oh, it's 25 letters now. And I'm like, okay, keep this in mind. If they're dividing you, they're not allowing you to collectively bargain. Let's think about this, right? If the issues that are being presented are only trans issues, and trans is just this one piece, they're slicing it and making it even smaller because it's no longer LGBTQ plus. It's not everybody all in one for all of those issues. It's only trans issues, right? The trans issues don't affect the gay issues. So don't drag them into it. They're amplifying issues for a smaller subset to raise the outrage level and to literally, how do I say this? It's like when my mother-in-law, my former mother-in-law is now passed, she would get direct mail every day that said that Obama was going to take away her Social Security if she didn't send them $5. And then she could enter the sweepstakes and win, hundreds of millions of dollars, just send in $20. All these things, scams, everything scams. But they're literally propaganda meant to push a button, meant to elicit a reaction of support on behalf of the person who's terrifying you. Right. And this is how they'd get the seniors. They're going to cancel Social Security. They're going to take away Medicare. They're going to take away this. Well, this is the problem, right? Most of it is not fact checked. The propaganda goes right into the mailbox. The sweepstakes, where she actually ended up getting suckered into paying the taxes via Western Union for a sweepstakes that she won, that wouldn't her family be surprised when she showed them the check. What did it cost them? It cost them a burner phone, a couple burner phones, like no big. And they run these scams all the time, and they're preying on our seniors. And we have removed the ability to have critical thinking out of the whole conversation in society. You're not allowed to have critical thinking or ask questions. Therefore, we're actually putting our senior citizens and our future senior citizens at risk by also segregating people into these very small pieces, right? I mean, why not come up with what are our core values that each human individually, right, has a right to? Well, we already have it in our Constitution: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I would say sexual preference rise, as long as it's not children, animals, or relatives, I don't freaking care. Two consenting adults can do whatever they like. The quandary becomes, you know, when children are involved, which I'm very supportive. I have a friend who has a trans child. Absolutely guaranteed 100%. Like this is a girl. Absolutely a girl. 1000% agree. If you met this girl, you would never know because she's a girl. Then there's a question, right? But to literally try and they're creating this whole thing. It's called parens patres. It's where the state becomes the parent. So there's this argument that on the right, they're trying to instill that parents have the first say, but I think it goes a little too far. And on the left, they're trying to say the children have all the say and all the decision making, which makes no sense because children are children and they shouldn't actually make lifetime decisions at, under the age of 25, probably. But anyway, at the age of 8 to 10. But the rule is, according to the AMA, and I know this because several doctors have reported to me, this is what was on their test when they're taking the test, that the proper diagnosis and treatment plan for a child who says they don't feel like they're, a binary gender, is to prescribe hormones immediately without parental notification or consent required. I don't think that's good either. There's cancer risk. There's all sorts of risk. I think parents need to be counseled if they have a problem with it. And, we need to come up with other solutions. But this all or nothing, see, this is where we're having a problem. We're allowing the fringes, the sides, the very, very vocal sides of all the way left and all the way right. And they keep moving so farther away. I'm surprised they don't meet back in the middle on the other side, but they should, right? We really need the people in the middle to be driving this conversation. And we need to be listening to our children. But at the same time, back in the 80s, we had this heroin chic, like anorexia epidemic, and it was pretty epidemic. And what did we do? We did after school programs. We did, after school movies, all these different things to really explain, this is your brain on drugs, and, you got to eat, and all of the things that were affecting our kids negatively. And yet, Nike did a survey and it said 24% of kids under the age of 25 don't identify as a singular gender. Well, okay. So there's a couple of questions that boil up for me. One, you know, my girlfriend brought this up. She's like, "You're old. We're old. We don't get to decide. We have to listen to the kids." And I'm like, She brought up in the 60s, the adults didn't like the long hair and the hippies and all that. Is that it? Is it that the youngsters in society are moving in a direction that, we old fogies and stick in the muds are like, no, that's not a thing. That shit. Because, like, she's like, "You're old." I was like, "No, I'm not. I'm, I'm, I don't look old. I don't feel old, but am I culturally old?" Question. That's just a question. Or number two, are we doing something inherently dangerous to our children, to society, to our in fact humanity and the human civilization, where we have created this situation where our children are not identifying as binary? Does that mean that there will be a dramatic reduction in procreation? Maybe. Does that mean that the religions that do procreate and outlaw uh, homosexuality are going to procreate more and take over? What does it mean? Is that's my question, right? Like, so what does that mean for the future? So if we fast forward 100 years, does it mean that this particular generation is the bridging, right? Because we see a lot of increases in autism and Aspie. Is that just a higher way of thinking on a different brainwave, where maybe we're going to get to the point where we can actually communicate telepathically, and this is just an evolutionary jump, and we're in the transition of the jump? Like, I mean, literally, I can go all sci-fi. My whole point is there's so many questions. And the only thing that I see politically is accusations, shame, blame, pointing fingers, and a refusal to let the other side win at any cost. Nobody's exploring the questions or the why. Maybe we should do that.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And like for many, many years, I've always felt like we're not addressing the elephant in the room. Like we keep addressing the symptoms, the effects, but not like what's causing all of this imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe that um, our generation is responsible because we've had a lot of changes in our lifetime, technologically, and the way that we communicate and the way we relate to one another. And I find that we're not as connected with one another. And, we're about instant gratification. And we have so much luxury and freedom that we create these problems for ourselves that aren't always like the best ones to try to solve, if that makes sense. Because, like, when we're bored, what do? We create challenges. But then I think there's also an aspect of it where um, everybody wants to feel special, and we are all special, and we all are unique. But people, especially children, aren't getting that acknowledgement enough. This is my theory, obviously. I don't know, this is just from my observation and my own experiences. And it's like parents don't parent the way they used to. And this is, I'm sure this happens every generation, but it's like, it's number one reason I decided to run for president. Like 20 years ago, when I first knew I was going to run, before I ever told anybody, I don't know how to explain it, like a dream or a vision where I saw that I had to go to that place because I had to influence our values. Like I recognize, like growing up in a very abusive circumstances in my life and just experiencing a lot of discrimination from the time I was in preschool. Like I always wondered, like, why do people treat people the way they do? Why do people hurt each other? And I recognize it's our values. So ultimately, like everything that's going on in the world and especially in our country comes down to our values changing, and they aren't necessarily changing in a healthy direction because like balance is the key. And if we're going to these extremes, we're creating disease within ourselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, and then it's coming out into the world. versus like trying to live more balanced lives. But like the thing I struggle with is how do you sell essentially personal responsibility? How do you make personal responsibility sexy so that people like want to like learn to understand themselves, learn to understand how nature works, like observe patterns and recognize like what we're capable of and what we can do and create together. Like if we just held ourselves personally accountable, like there's just so much to what you shared that like I hope that what I reflected back to you makes sense, like where I'm coming from, because I find like I get what the solutions are, but I don't get like how to implement them.
Watching. That was my whole thing, personal responsibility and self-reliance. Before we can get to a self-sovereign society, we first have to get rid of the victimhood. We have to get rid of the idea that it's always someone else's fault and someone is always here to save me. We have to stop that. We have to get back to the old west, okay? You literally live in the middle of nowhere. You have a gun, you shoot your own food. Personal responsibility, self-reliance, right? Personal responsibility is you don't just randomly play with guns because it's cool and accidentally shoot somebody. You train your children how to use a weapon. You take responsibility for things, and you learn enough that you can become self-reliant, and you know how to fish, you know how to hunt, you know where to get water, you know how to start a fire, like the things that you need to basically survive. Those things are different nowadays because, generally you're not going to have to build a fire unless you're going to be a survivalist. I do suggest that everyone go to prepper school at some point, just in case. Zombie apocalypse. I mean, come on, we almost had it. We almost had it a couple of times there. Like we avoided it, like, almost. So you never know. It's always a good idea to know how to start a fire and land a plane and drive a big rig. I don't know. Have you watched Terminator T2 a few times? Right? Skynet. Just saying. So probably a good idea. But that's personal responsibility and self-reliance. What happens when we move society back to that point, right? Will society move back to a point of um, it doesn't matter what you do because it doesn't impact me? Because right now society is at, I need to control what you do so I can have what I want without doing anything. Does that make sense? So my kid accidentally ran into this Reddit subreddit, something literally about how to live your life in luxury without having to get a job, work, or do anything. And I was like, are you shitting me? This is a movement. It's a movement of people who
Yeah.
don't do anything, don't want to work the system and have the system provide everything for them. Well, if we're going to do that, then honestly, what we really need to do is create some form of universal basic income, right? Do away with income taxes altogether, and just do a universal basic income.
But here's the thing, like when you give money away for free, it's not really free, but also
No,
like the price of everything goes up. You're not
no, no,
encouraging production,
no,
you
no,
know. It's 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 I get what you're saying, but I also it's like, raising minimum wage doesn't
no, no.
actually
That
help
doesn't.
people make more money because everything else goes up to
Else goes up. No,
compensate.
I'm talking about the utopian, dystopian. Have you ever read Walden 2?
No, I haven't.
Read Walden 2. I think you'll really enjoy it. It's basically they earn points in a collective based on their contribution to the collective. So if they dig a ditch, that's worth more than rocking a baby. Because, rocking a sleeping baby is actually like, oh my God, it's so cute. I smell the top of their heads. They just, oh my, just side total tangent. A couple years ago was I smelled the top of a baby's head and I had nothing. I was like, nothing. Nothing. No urge to have one more, one more, one more. Mother Nature had been toying with me for a decade. I'd literally see these little babies and I'd smell the top of their head. And all of a sudden, my uterus was like, you could fit one more in here. And I'm like, stop it. No. Right. And so then that went away and I was like, oh, yes, yes, yes. And then I was moving from Reno. I was at my having a garage sale and this little 2-year-old comes running up, cutest little thing. Oh my God. Triggered the grandma button. Like, I did not know I had one of those. I had the best time with her. I'm feeding her lunch. We were just having a ball. And I could give her back. I was like, I didn't know there was a grandma button. But yeah, it got pushed. Total tangent. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. Well, because we're talking about essentially, I mean, in a way, like we're talking about communism, and I'm trying to remember exactly who said
Well, I
it, and I
wasn't,
think it was
not
somebody in the, huh?
not communism. I'm not talking about communism, right? So, well, kind of. Commune, our version, not Russian communism, right? Russian communism is where everything goes to the state, right? And the state decides everything. And if you look at the way that the left is pushing everything, that's what they want. They want to take parental rights away, where the government, the schools, the teachers, everybody else makes all the decisions. And the parents really have no say. And I'm like, no. So there needs to be a balance, right? We, the people, should actually come up with what are the norms? What are societal norms, right? Now it's going to vary in different places, right? Obviously, if you're in Salt Lake City, Utah, you're going to get a little bit more conservative than if you are in the Castro district in San Francisco. That's going to be quite a bit different. That's why when I was doing my dating app, the grand jury pool was always in context, right? So, as a society, what is normal, right? But we can do a general basic framework that would cover, and I always say the sensible middle is 70% of us, and we agree on 90% of the sensible middle platform, fiscally conservative, socially progressive, right? Clean air, clean water, probably a good idea. Our gay friends should be able to get married. Keep your hands off my body up to 12 to 16 weeks is totally reasonable. 20, that's a baby. Sensible middle, right? Reasonable, sensible, and really about liberty and letting people have opportunity with kind of like the bowling bumpers, the guardrails, right? Like little guardrails way out here, plenty of room to get everything done, but just in case you want to get too close to the guardrails. But we should figure out what is appropriate standards, right? And I thought it was funny because, years and years and years ago, I was up in arms because the Bratz dolls were wearing lace thongs. I'm sorry. Why is a Bratz doll wearing a lace thong? These are toys for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old girls. Why are they even being exposed to a lace thong at that age? That's called grooming. We need to stop grooming our children and making them more adult than they need to be. I think that's part of the problem is the exposure level. Like it's just if we go back, like let's look at 8 is enough. Let's look at some of the, and what's so funny is these I'm looking at the, you know, Knight Rider and the A Team and Magnum PI and all they were, prime time. They were really pushing the envelope back then. And I look at it and I'm like, yeah, that's not even close to what we're doing today. I mean, we're tackling issues way different today. But, when you look at the things, what do we need to teach our kids? They need to be good people. They need to be helpful. They need to believe in themselves, be encouraging to others, um, follow their hopes and dreams. Like these are the core values we need to instill in our children, right? And not have them prematurely be faced with the choice in elementary school to choose one of 48 genders. Why are we teaching that in elementary school? I didn't have sex ed till high school. No, I understand. Junior high school, probably a good idea. They're giving blowjobs in bathrooms in junior high school. Maybe address that early, but you don't have to go all the way down the rabbit hole with them. Just age appropriate. So I'm just saying we need to ask more questions and figure out, rather than just keep telling everybody that the other side is wrong, because that's all I hear is the other side is wrong. The other side is wrong. The other side is wrong. Great. What's correct? And universally correct. And I mean like gravity, understood to be correct. I almost feel like if we put it to that and we say things in such a way that it's absolutely irrefutable to both sides, that they, yeah, these are our core values, I bet we could come to a consensus. We just have to have reasonable people on both sides of the conversation participate. There we go.
Yeah. Well, and also exposure, right? Like repetition. People need, it's not enough that there's like a small group of people that come together and have these kinds of conversations. It really needs to be out in the mainstream and become a regular thing. Because right now, like what's out in the mainstream isn't this kind of a conversation yet.
Mm-mm. That's the whole point. Blockchain again. So there's like an anti-apathy app that we're working on. There's all these different pieces. But the whole idea is to get people having a conversation, and what do we really want? And what are the core values that we want to uphold? Because, it reminds me of dating, and maybe I should say it this way. Today's political climate reminds me of women trying to date. The law of attraction says what you focus on expands. Well, women know exactly what they don't want. We can literally tell you down to the nth degree exactly all of the things that make us crazy and what we will not tolerate, and what is not going to be allowed in our next relationship. But the moment that you ask them what they do want, about 30% of the room bursts into tears because they really don't know. And politically right now, that's kind of where we're at. Everybody knows I don't want that. The other side is evil. We have to overcome the other side. Why? Because they're wrong and evil, not because the plans and the issues that we have solved or think we have solved or the ideas to solve them have enough merit to overcome the noise on their own. They don't. So it's all about hate. Hate is a very strong driver, but I would like everyone to go back and watch Monsters, Inc. They used to think fear was the ultimate generator of power, but it's not. It's love and laughter. So let's get back to actually making a difference with ideas and solutions and give up on the hate.
Hmm. Thank you. I don't know if you ever read it, but I published an article back in the Huffington Post in 2016 because I was nervous about Trump winning. And it was exactly like what you said, like all this energy against him is actually helping him versus like, what do you want? Right. And that's something I really do my best. Like every day I journal and I write about like, what is it that I want? Right? Because we don't, for some reason, we're not really taught to focus on what we want. We're taught to focus on what we don't want. And it brings more of it to us versus like, okay, just be really, really clear about what you want. And don't give energy to anything else. Because the more you do, the more you're going to resonate with it, the more you're going to bring it into your life. And I'm not really sure why we're not taught to get clear about like what we want or like why we're taught like choose between the lesser of two evils, like why not just not choose evil at all? Why not choose what you believe is good? It's just I know I believe we're getting there, right? Like as I say these things, I'm like I do have faith. I do see a light at the end of the tunnel. I hope it's in our lifetime. But it's just it's yeah, I guess patience is something that I'm really working on, is like recognizing that it takes people time to get to this place and to recognize like how, you know, life plays out, like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, and how we have to change our habits, how we have to reprogram our thinking, and that it's work, but it's rewarding work because we get what we want in the end.
Very true. I will tell you, I stopped watching TV, and I have a few close friends that if something in the news politically is happening that I need to know about, They'll tell me. And I have them on all sides, by the way. Keep in mind, I'm not I'm not looking for just one source of information. I've got like 6, 7 on either side. So I get to keep up with what I need to keep up with, but at the same time, I literally avoid all of the drama, all of the cortisol inducing television programming, and I just focus on what I want. So that mantra, what you focus on expands. Keep in mind the universe doesn't hear negatives. So when you're saying I don't want this, it just hears this, right? I don't want puppies. All you're going to see is puppies. I don't want any more babies. I'm done having babies. Babies everywhere, right? Like you just have to focus on what you want. Be very, very clear and intentional. Ignore everything else. What do you want? Focus on that. And don't make it something based on hate. Always make it something based on abundance and growth. That's how you make it through the day in today's society. I'm just saying, it's how I'm productive. That's why when Grammarly sends me things, you wrote 135,000 words this week, I was like, damn, mama didn't watch TV at all.
Yeah, you get a lot done when you're not paying attention to all the propaganda out there. I'm amazed like how much I write lately. I'm in a similar boat where I'm just like not tuning into anything out there and just really focusing on creating. And it's like the first thing I do when I get up in the morning is write, because I don't want to be influenced by anything out there. And it's, yeah, it feels good to have that kind of control.
Yeah,
Mm. So I'm curious, like we've gone through a lot, and this has been an unexpected and wild ride. Well, actually, before I go there, there is something I won't really specifically want to know because I'm kind of ignorant about it, and I know it's one of your areas of expertise. Like, tell me a little bit about blockchain because I've been like hearing you talk about it for years, and I know like one of the things I love about you is how candid and open you are, like talking about, dating experiences and how do you build trust and the part that blockchain plays in that. Could you share a bit about it? Because, like I said, I'm completely clueless. I have friends in that space, but I just don't know, and I'm sure there are others that are curious, and you're somebody that I do trust.
sure. So a blockchain is an unfuckwithable ledger of what actually happened. Boom, there. That is a blockchain. If people want to use a blockchain in various different ways, they can. So, in one context, you have peer-to-peer finance called DeFi, decentralized finance. Now, the reason that you can do this is because the Constitution guarantees our right to contract peer to peer. They cannot interfere with that. So that means if I say I'm going to uh, I'm going to put up this much of some asset I have and I want to borrow against it, someone else can loan me the money against that. What the blockchain does is put a smart contract in between it. So this person has staked X and said, I'm going to borrow this Y for a certain amount of time for a certain amount of interest. And if I don't pay it back, you get X. And so once that time is told, if the bill is not paid, Y is then transferred to the person who is it's owed to. So it's triggered. Um, Smart contracts are not necessarily smart and they're not necessarily contracts. They are just a transparent record of what actually took place, right? So if you think about it that way, you can think about it like trigger leads, right? So the example I usually give is a sensor in the ceiling of a warehouse notifies or trips the smart contract that the light is out. The smart contract checks, is there a light in stock? Nope, they have to order it. So that puts it in the queue, waiting for the trigger that the light was sent and arrived in the shipping. Then it gets transferred to the maintenance person who goes and actually fixes the light, and the sensor triggers that the light is no longer out and closes the smart contract. Now, the only reason that you would need to use blockchain for this, because you can literally do all of that right now, the immutability of the record of the transaction, right? Of all of those processes and when and where And those types of things are actually truly necessary when it comes to things like voting. Now, am I saying every single human should have voter ID? Yes, I would like that. Is that going to happen in my lifetime? Probably not. Too many people benefit from it not. So let's start with an immutable ledger of what actually happened. Let's take every single voting tabulating machine and every voting machine um, and ensure that there is an adequate paper record that is randomly timestamped, right? With an audit track on the blockchain that cannot be overwritten, and that every single poll worker and every single tabulator, person working in tabulation, everyone has their own ID because they're sharing the same Dominion logins. And so there's one Dominion login, and you see all these things happening at the same time, and you're like, there's like 50 people using this one login. So you can't tell who did what. So let's end that. Let's make sure that we have literally audits counting, checking the count as it goes, as it goes, as it goes, as it goes, because then actually the smart contract would be able to count up all those subtotals and give you a preliminary, and then you could see if that's actually what came out, and then you would know if there was a problem, right? So these are the things, like the audit records are gone. There was 230,000 votes added within 20 minutes when the machines that they were using and the number of machines could have only calculated, I think it was 12,000. The number was ridiculously lower than what was actually added to the count. So that had to be an adjudication batch. Where did those adjudications come from? So when a ballot is adjudicated, it goes into a little batch file for a human to verify that this is what this ballot says. And then it batch adds them at the same time. Well, who did that? And where did the batch come from? So each ballot would have a serial number and almost become an NFT, right? With that's what I think would be great. I think every single person who votes should be able to create that NFT that has the vote, and they can still issue it anonymously, right? We just know it came from this machine in this district or whatever, because they'll have to have, but that way they would be numbered. It would be consecutive. You would know if they were inserting massive amounts of ballots, that just didn't happen, because you would also know when the polling place opened and closed. You'd have we started with this number and we ended with this number of NFTs. So every single ballot is an NFT. Then the mail-in votes, that's where it's going to be fun. Mail-in, but you have to actually, I think you would have to tie in a way on mail-in votes. It doesn't get to be as anonymous because you have to tie that this real human being issued a token, almost like an ICO, right? Here's a signature of a person, and you have to keep all of those envelopes. That issues a token. So then that's how many tokens are in the pool that can be used to issue the mail-in ballots. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I really appreciate that example. It's that is something I've been wondering about, like how do we have more integrity in voting? So it was nice to have you explain it in such detail.
Yeah, we just want every single US citizen over the age of 18 who is still living and desires to do so to have easy access to the ballot box and certainty that their ballot was counted and tabulated correctly. That is
Speaking of
all.
18, something you got me thinking about earlier, you mentioned 25 as an age that, I forget verbatim what you said, but essentially like when we really start to know ourselves. It's funny that you brought up that number because one of the senators I've worked with in the past in criminal justice reform, Senator Skinner, she was pushing, I don't know if she is anymore, I've kind of dropped out of there, but she was pushing for criminals up to the age of 25 to be treated as juveniles because she's found some science that says that like our brains aren't like fully developed and we can't really reason right or wrong yet fully until that age. So I thought it was interesting, and I learned from her too that the number 18 years old rather is an arbitrary number that was like made up back in the day because like America wanted young people to join the military to fight for this country because they knew they couldn't really recognize like the gravity of what they were signing up for. So it's really fascinating how we've picked these numbers that are arbitrary, and there isn't really science saying, oh, you're an adult, then you can fully reason and understand the consequences of your choices. I'm not saying like let's change, being adult from 18 to 25 or anything like that, but it's just interesting to consider like how did we come up with that number, and do we really know who we are and what's best for us and others in general when, at a certain age.
I would think that that is a conversation worth having because you are considered to be legal at 18. So you can move out of your parents' house, you can contract on your own, you can't drink until you're 21. And I think that you can't own a handgun until you're 21, but you can own a rifle when you're 18, well, even 12 in some states. But basically, I think there is a considerable amount of data and evidence that would suggest that, especially for criminals, there should be different thresholds. So juvenile up to 17 and 360 days or whatever. And then an 18 to 25 youth consideration, I think would be absolutely appropriate, not automatically treat them as an adult. There should actually be a separate, but then, criminals are going to just have that's why they use the kids as drug mules and lookouts and all these other things, because then they just get a juvie record, right? So criminals will figure out how to do it, but there's ample evidence that we do need to have different sentences, but also look at what Sweden does, especially for drugs. They go to rehab. That's it. They go to
Yeah.
rehab. They have a much higher quality of life.
Yeah, well, we don't really have a program that helps people to make better choices when they come out. That was part of the reason I was interested in criminal justice reform, is I was really hoping to influence the people I worked with to push programs like that, but I didn't see it happen. But it's like
Right.
if you keep, okay, being too, easy on people that harm others is not teaching them to stop doing the things that they did in the first place. Like there needs to be a system that re-educates them, that gives them hope, versus just like put them in a cage and treat them like an animal for however long and then let them go out exactly where they came from, but like worse off because they've been disconnected.
So the dog program works really, really well. So we should literally, we have all of these dogs that are being euthanized, and, we should just turn them into prison companions. That works. That whole program works. But the other thing is, we we kept, this is what I found interesting during COVID. They kept a friend of mine who is in federal prison for something stupid his business partner did now 9 years ago, that was very low value cost wise, that had already had restitution paid within 6 months, like 9 years ago. He did 18 months in federal prison. And yet we have criminals who are literally up on charges uh, of rape that are let out and rape again while they're on parole, like while they're awaiting trial. Like, what the heck? The thought process around these things is not logical. And I think that is actually, if we did that as the very first layer of prison reform, right? If prison is meant to protect society, right? I think we need to be able to have, just like we have the grand jury to decide whether they can prosecute this, that, and the other thing. Um, I think we need to just have a decentralized grand jury that looks at these different appeals, right? I mean, like, there was no rhyme or reason for anything other than somebody just had a hard on for white collar. And I'm like, okay. Now, do I think that Bernie Madoff, needed to be convicted? Well, yes, I do. Um, so you have to look at the size of the scam, the number of people affected, like all of these different pieces, right? And is it sending a message and all this other stuff? But um, you know, we the people footing the tax bill is is not, I think, in our best interest when, for certain crimes, and I mean like marijuana, like petty stuff, right? They should not be in prison in the first place when they could be on home confinement. Why would we not just leave them at home? I don't want to pay their food. I don't want to pay their lodging. Uh, and we could literally save billions, uh, even if we're paying for the ankle bracelet.
Yeah. One of the things I learned from Senator Skinner was, and I forget exactly now, but I think it was between 100 and 150 grand per year is what we're paying for inmates in the Bay Area.
Right,
Every person that's incarcerated, and, it's like, how many people are making that much money per year?
right, right. That's I don't like that. I would rather make sure that and actually what I would like is I would like to institute a healthy school lunch program where everybody's lunch is covered. Why is it covered? Then it isn't that, oh, that's the poor boy who's on the lunch program and gets the free lunch. It's all equal. Everybody's equal. Everybody gets lunch. And everybody has to grow in the garden. And then the chef at the school will incorporate the things that they grew. Like my kid had garden. They had a garden in kindergarten. They grew stuff. They ate that stuff. Like they ate salads. Why did they eat salad? Because they grew all the things for the salad. So they ate it. Why don't we do that for everything? But the same thing. Oh, I'm gonna have to go.
That's fine. No, I know we could keep going on, and I really enjoy connecting with you, and I will hold my comments till next time. But I'm wondering, like, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up and go into the closing concept?
No, I'm good.
Thank you. Well, I really just appreciate everything that you've shared and inspired, and I'm sure people tuning in also have learned a lot and been inspired. And I'll go into the closing concept now. I am the place where life shines through, for life and I are one, not two. Life wants me where and as I am. I need not fret, nor fear, nor plan. If I will be relaxed and free, life will carry out its work through me. Thank you again.